St. Louis is how we're going to start today. They're marking this Juneteenth holiday by dedicating a memorial to an important and often forgotten chapter of American history. It involves Dred Scott, the key figure in an infamous Supreme Court case. Scott was an enslaved man who claimed that he and his family should be freed because they had lived for a time in a free state. He sued under a Missouri law and he won, leading to an 11-year legal battle. In 1857, the Supreme Court threw out that verdict, a decision that helped put the North and South on a collision course towards civil war. Now, here's something I bet you didn't know. We certainly didn't. Scott was not the only person to file a freedom suit. Chris Van Cleve met a judge descended from slavery who fought for years to establish a memorial to them.
The sound of history being remembered. A story of freedom fighters being honored. Cast in more than 8,000 pounds of bronze and standing nearly 2 stories tall. This monument's installation in front of the St. Louis Civil Courts building is the emotional end to a story that began 2 centuries ago. Missouri law held if a person was once free, they were always free. It allowed slaves like Dred and Harriet Scott to sue for their freedom. The Scott story, spelled out in these handwritten affidavits, convinced an all-white jury to free them.
This was really based on family preservation.
Lynn Jackson is their great-great-granddaughter.
They were there to save their daughters. They hid them away for possibly up to 2 years just to keep them from being sold during this process.
For about 20 years, there was a sort of a golden age of slave freedom suits.
Historian Kenneth Wynn was the Missouri State Archivist when a court clerk made a startling discovery. The Scotts were not alone. Buried in old court records and lost to history until the late 1990s, were at least 306 so-called freedom suits brought by slaves in St. Louis seeking their freedom. Wynn estimates more than 120 cases were successful.
It shows the collective effort of a people trying to be free, who did not rest and just accept their lot in slavery, but resisted it. It really speaks in some ways to people who believed in the integrity of the law.
Tucked inside this case file from 1821, the jury's findings, handwritten by its foreman, we, all the jurors, find that the plaintiff is free.
This is something that St. Louis should honor. You had to be pretty brave and courageous just to file the suit, because if you lost, the consequences could be dire.
Circuit Court Judge David Mason, a descendant of slaves, spent the last 14 years pushing for a freedom suit memorial. Its installation brought him to tears.
And when I'm reading these files and reading the affidavits of the slaves, I mean, I'm hearing them. I'm feeling them. I'm hearing my people. These were some of the strongest people over 500 years that have ever been produced in American society.
These freedom suits were hard-fought legal victories. Remember, it's the middle of the 1800s, so a slave walking into a St. Louis courtroom wasn't allowed to read or write, couldn't even testify in a court of law. The judge and jury consisted solely of white men, and Missouri was a slave state. Here's a time when the jury was likely biased against the person suing for their freedom. The judge was likely biased in some ways against them, and that the system still worked.
Yes.
What does that say about justice?
That means that it can work. Truth is powerful. Facts are powerful. Having the strength to look falsehood in the eye and call it out for what it is powerful.
Funded by private donations, the towering sculpture entitled Freedom's Home is set to be officially unveiled as the nation celebrates Juneteenth. The names of all 330 known freedom suit plaintiffs will be added around its base. What do you think Dred and Harriet would say?
They would be happy and they would be proud, but they would totally feel like they did not deserve all of this recognition.
A piece of American history, once largely lost, well worth recognizing and remembering. For CBS Mornings, I'm Chris Van Cleve in St. Louis.